A cold silence is spreading across Russian cities. It is the silence of factories that once shook the ground with machines, but now stand cold and hollow. It is the silence of long supermarket aisles where shelves look full until you notice the missing items. It is the silence of workers standing outside locked gates, wondering how they will bring food home tonight. This silence is more dangerous to Vladimir Putin than any tank or drone, because a system does not collapse when the army retreats. A system collapses when the workers whose hands built the country begin to turn on the leader they once trusted. Across Russia, the anger is not coming from activists or dissidents. It is coming from ordinary people who never protested in their lives. It is coming from the engineers, mechanics, and factory workers that Putin relied on for 20 years. It is coming from the 254,000 Russians who were quietly pushed into forced unpaid leave and salary cuts as their industries began to collapse. What began as a hidden crisis has now erupted into a wave of panic inside the Kremlin. Putin still talks about stability, but even his closest allies are admitting that the economy is spinning out of control. When a central bank governor says she cannot predict the impact of sanctions, it means the government has lost the steering wheel. When a defense industry executive says companies are returning to barter deals like the 1990s, it means the engine of the economy has already stopped running. The collapse is no longer hidden behind statistics. It is visible in every corner of Russian life. People can feel it in their stomachs. The price of milk has risen so sharply that consumption has dropped 8%. Rice purchases have fallen 10%. These are not luxury goods. These are the foods families rely on every day. When a father cannot afford milk for his child, he is not thinking about geopolitics. He is thinking about survival. And when millions begin thinking this way, something dangerous begins to form beneath the surface. Putin understands this. That is why he tried to calm the public back in August when he claimed that hidden unemployment was affecting around 200,000 people. He wanted to freeze the number, hold it still, pretend the problem was contained. But the number kept growing. And only 2 months later, his own Ministry of Labor admitted the truth. The figure had exploded past 254,000. The crisis had doubled in 7 months and accelerated far beyond what the Kremlin expected. These workers are not officially fired. On paper, they still have jobs, but their factories have stopped production. Their salaries were cut or stopped entirely. They were placed on forced unpaid leave. They do not receive unemployment benefits. They cannot find new jobs because their sectors are collapsing. And they watch Putin go on television bragging about low unemployment while their refrigerators are empty. This is the social time bomb the Kremlin fears most. It is not middle-class opposition. It is not political activists. It is the collapse of the livelihood of the people who kept the country running while the elites grew richer. It is happening in the railways. It is happening in Gazprom subsidiaries. It is happening in metal works factories from the Urals to the Volga region. It is happening at the tank factories that were once the pride of the regime. Putin always promised them stability. He told them Russia would never return to the chaos of the 1990s. But now the same nightmare is unfolding again, and it is unfolding under his rule. How did this happen so fast? The answer is simple and bleak. Putin built a war machine so large that it is now devouring the rest of the economy to survive. The government printed money to pay for weapons and salaries. That printing created massive inflation. To stop the inflation, the central bank raised interest rates to 16 and 17%, the highest in the modern history of Russia. That high interest rate suffocated civilian businesses. No one could borrow money. No one could expand. No one could survive a cash flow delay. Companies began collapsing because they could not access credit. And industries collapsed because they lost their workers to the war factories. This is industrial cannibalism. One part of the economy consuming the other. The war factories offer higher wages, so engineers and technicians abandon civilian jobs. The civilian sector loses the labor it needs to operate. Production slows, salaries fall, companies dissolve, workers are forced into hidden unemployment. Meanwhile, the war factories cannot operate smoothly either because inflation makes their costs explode. Eventually, even the war machine begins to break apart. That moment has now arrived. The clearest proof came from Uralvagonzavod, the largest railcar producer in Russia and the manufacturer of tanks for the Russian army. In theory, this factory should be booming. War requires tanks. Orders should be overflowing. But local media reports say they are preparing major layoffs. 10% of the workforce gone by February. Hiring frozen. Some departments facing layoffs up to 50%. This is not normal. This is a sign that the fuel tank is empty. If even the tank factory cannot pay salaries, cannot buy parts, cannot stay afloat, then the system is no longer functioning. The war machine has begun eating itself. Inside the Kremlin, this reality is now impossible to hide. Central Bank Governor Elvira Nabiullina tried to present confidence in public, but her own words betrayed the truth. She admitted monetary conditions remain tight. She admitted inflation is out of control. She admitted that the easing cycle would stretch deep into 2026. That is a polite way of saying most Russians will not be able to buy a house, start a business, or even take out a basic loan for at least 2 years. Credit has become a luxury. This is why companies across Russia are falling back into 1990s-style barter. One factory delivers raw materials in exchange for food products from another. One manufacturer gives spare parts and receives fuel instead of cash. This is not modernization, this is regression. It means money has become unreliable. It means banks have failed to provide liquidity. It means the ruble is no longer trusted by the very industries that keep the country alive. When Russia collapsed in the 1990s, the economy shrank by nearly 50%. Hyperinflation wiped out bank accounts overnight. People stood in lines for hours just to buy bread. Putin came to power by promising this would never happen again. He said he would restore stability. He said he would restore dignity. Many believed him because life did improve for a while. Salaries rose, infrastructure expanded. The economy grew, but that social contract has now been torn apart. The same horrors people survived 30 years ago are returning. And this time, the cause is not a political revolution. It is a war they did not choose. The most painful part is that the people hardest hit by this crisis are the ones who trusted Putin the most. Factory workers, train operators, welders, mechanics, public employees. They are the backbone of regions that consistently voted for Putin. They believed he protected their jobs. But now their salaries are cut in half. Their factory gates are locked. Their tables are missing the food they once took for granted. And they see the government spending billions on missiles while telling them to accept unpaid leave. This is the moment when support begins to crack. When daily life becomes a struggle, loyalty fades. People do not riot over geopolitics. They riot when their children go hungry. They riot when their jobs disappear. They riot when they realize they were lied to. And this is what terrifies the Kremlin. They know the numbers. They know the anger is rising. They know the explosion is coming from the places they once believed were loyal forever. Every new economic report reveals the same story. More layoffs, more forced leave, more factories shutting down, more salaries cut. Inflation rising again, milk and rice disappearing from household budgets. People selling possessions to survive the month. Communities pooling resources. Supermarkets adjusting prices daily because the currency keeps losing value. This is the landscape of collapse. But it is not happening on the edges of society. It is happening at the very heart of Putin's base. The Kremlin cannot fix this with propaganda. They cannot call this a slowdown when 254,000 workers are losing their income. They cannot call this stability when tank factories are laying people off. They cannot call this prosperity when people cannot buy milk. The truth is too loud to silence. It echoes through every kitchen, every grocery store, and every industrial zone. It echoes through the silence of machines that no longer move. Something very simple is happening. The war that Putin insisted Russia could afford is bankrupting the industries that hold the nation together. The workers know it. Their families know it. Their managers know it. Even the officials inside the Kremlin know it. For the first time in years, the danger facing Putin is not foreign pressure. It is not NATO. It is not protests in Moscow. It is the anger of ordinary workers who now see that the leader who promised stability has delivered hunger. And the final proof arrived quietly. Local reporters in the Ural region interviewed several workers who had just been placed on unpaid leave. One of them said a sentence that reveals the entire reality. He said he did not care who wins the war anymore. He only cared whether he could feed his daughter next week. That is the moment a regime begins to fall apart. When people stop believing the story of national greatness and begin asking why the richest country in natural resources cannot provide milk. This crisis is no longer about economics. It is about survival. It is about betrayal. It is about the collapse of trust between a leader and the people who once stood behind him. And the most dangerous part is that the collapse is accelerating. Each month brings more forced leave, more layoffs, more factory closures, more basic foods disappearing from carts. The system is losing oxygen. And when the system runs out of oxygen, it does not sink slowly. It implodes. The final warning has already been delivered by the people who know the truth best. Not dissidents, not journalists, but Russian workers. They are the ones who feel the crisis first. They are the ones who carry the burden, and they are the ones now turning on the Kremlin because the promises of stability have turned into the reality of bankruptcy and empty shelves. The new silent question spreading across Russia is simple. If the government cannot protect the people who built the country with their own hands, then who is it protecting? Here is the final truth Putin cannot escape. A government can survive sanctions. It can survive political opposition. It can survive propaganda failures. But it cannot survive a nation of workers who can no longer feed their children. That is the moment systems collapse, and that moment is now very close. Please like and subscribe to support our channel. Before you go, remember, we're completely independent. No big networks, no sponsors, and no government influence. In a world full of corruption and scripted news, your support keeps real journalism alive. So please like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps.